Chapter 5. After escaping that crowded restaurant with no answers to the myriad of questions that presented themselves, the fresh air seemed to lessen the grip the three deities held on me as we walked towards my home. Though I feared introducing yet another accursed visitor to my mother, and though I still did not want to believe the story of her supposed adventures in hunting such creatures, I admit I was in high hopes that the aura she seemed to provide would save me from the overbearing weight of the presences around me as it did the night before. Dealing with the advances of the crawling chaos had been the cause of a great deal of mental stress before, but now it seemed as if the King in Yellow had similar intentions in mind upon meeting me. It was far beyond my scope of imagination to think of how or why these things wanted to crossbreed with humanity, but a similar paralyzing fear gripped me as the mocking boyish yellow figure clung to my arm as we neared our destination. With a sigh of relief, I caught sight of my mother in front of the house, who had arrived at the same time we did. She took to the little yellow boy with no apprehension, and did not seem to take any sort of alarm when she was told of his true identity. Where my mother found this confidence in the face of these terrible creatures was a question whose answer I feared, as each story of conjecture the original arriver offered to explain the situation only caused me more concern for what sort of ancestry was contained in my blood. With no time to consider her reaction, however, the heavy gravity that I'd felt in the restaurant just time ago was weighing down on me again. As seemingly from out of nowhere, perhaps moving through space and time in some way, the figure of a green-haired woman emerged from a queer roar in the midst of our group. The creature, undoubtedly another deity, took the form of a woman, clad in cult robes that concealed green, tentacle-like hair. It offered no words, but a deep glare at my mother, who responded in confusion, before sweeping her up in her arms, and with a quick and powerful leap retreated to the roof of the house with its hostage. It finally spoke, booming, powerful words directed at the unspeakable one as it offered hints of an explanation to its visit, an explanation lost on me as the very sound of its voice seemed to echo inside my head with a terrible ring of inexplicable shrieking, my breath choked by a terribly foul odor. And it gripped my mother by the shoulder, claiming ownership over her and some space-dominating power along with her, some advantage to a conflict between two cosmic entities. Rooted by horror, I could only watch as the thing leaned in to whisper to my mother, and heard words that convinced her, whether by reason, bred of force, or even by some hypnotic power perhaps, to consent to the abduction by the rope thing. I must make it perfectly clear that up to this point, despite all the time I had spent with the fleet girl who arrived seemingly so long ago, or the fiery red being that came soon after, or even the king who only appeared this morning, I could never grow accustomed to the presence of these things. No matter what lurked in my blood that afforded my mother the composure she had, no matter the outward steeled look I was masked with, I spent every moment with these things in detest. And though I kept myself out of their debt at all costs, I found myself shouting over the screams in my head, begging for help from these visitors. My protector and the red-haired being sprang to the roof, and it was the living flame who first attacked the kidnapper. With an easy motion it dodged the swing of the otherworldly weapon, and with similar whispered words, the fiery elemental turned and faced the outer god with my mother and the green thing at its back. Great God! What power did this offender hold that it could coerce the great old one with simple words? Was it a simple offer for power or something similar? Or did it hold some power of suggestion that even these deities were susceptible to? My companion attacked the turned ally, crossing weapons that glowed with embers. The temperature in the air flared as the burning one attacked in a volley of swings that lit the air around them on fire, and the pharaoh was launched off the roof. I nearly sunk to my knees in hopelessness and confusion, as the two otherworldly creatures that retreated to a vehicle-like machine called forth by the rogue being. It had succeeded in its goal of capturing my mother, for purposes I did not dare to imagine. Despite her assurance that she would be back, the question of whether I would see my mother again crossed my mind. With both beings crammed into the oddly shaped vehicle, it lifted off the house, pointed toward the sky, and with a trail of odd green vapor, flew off into the red sky at a great speed, disappearing into space in an instant. I retreated into the house, dazed, wondering, and doubting if there was some sort of suitable action I could take. Naturally, I was powerless in this situation, but I did not know if I could bring myself to hope that my supposed protector would lend its aid in this situation, and I did not know if I was ready to accept it. To add to my fears was the usual mocking attitude that the thing took in this situation. Despite all my concerns and fears, It calmly sat in the living room with a cup of tea and a plate of desserts, enjoying the peacefulness of the house now that it was free of my mother and a fiery being. Similarly, the king in yellow roamed through my house with no trepidation, infatuated with my room and my possessions for reasons I did not want to think about. A sudden call rang in the living room, and after a short conversation, it seemed the location of my mother and her captors had been found, and the three of us would be off in pursuit. I was taken to the beach, looking again towards the sea as I had done only some days before. Though I could not imagine ever going there again in my life, I was yet again called to that dead city, the ancient Relia which had returned to the depths of the ocean. Though last time we had ridden there on the back of an ancient sea god, my companion produced another vehicle-like apparatus. This one, it claimed, adept at navigating through the sea. Though the thing had a mockingly affectionate name, I did not hear it as I was drawn to the queer aura of the machine. It was curiously human-like in origin compared to most of the things these visitors had shewn, with no normal hints of odd angles or shapes. Instead, the thing felt as if it were alive, or perhaps if it had been at some time. I could feel as if something inside the machine was crying, tortured, deceived, angry, and forgotten. And as we entered the vehicle to begin our journey, I could not ignore the whispered name of Nifron in the back of my head. My companion had explained to me that our journey to the corpse city was not a welcomed one as it was before. Though we were once ferried there on that infernal fish god as guests, we were now intruding upon the place as enemies. The vehicle ferried us through the water, the murky depths of the ocean widening as we made our way to our destination. Not long into our travels, we were met with a wall of creatures, a mass of humanoid fish-like things swimming in our direction. These were the Deep Ones, the race of ancient beings that were whispered to be the true cause of the desertion of that awful New England town near Arkham. These immortal creatures were met with an attack unleashed by the vehicle, summoned by a glyph of light my companion made use of. A number of missile-like projectiles, seemingly infinite in number, were launched at the fish-frog things and exploded upon impact, sending them reeling into the depths below. Our conflict was not over, however, as after the wall of Deep Ones sank out of view, we were met with the shadow of something that looked like a huge boulder. Instead it was the massive head of a creature I had seen once before, and though I had strained myself not to perceive the full image of that thing, it stood before me now in its full horrible image, the ancient fish god Dagon. A humanoid body stood tall on the ocean floor itself, with two powerful-looking legs and long arms, hands christened with dangerously sharp claws, and a fish-like head barely revealed by the red glow of its eyes, though a row of gigantic, sharp teeth in its mouth was unmistakable. My companion made no attempt to combat with the god of the Philistines, and instead chose to race past it towards a now visible queer glow on the ocean floor. Though we successfully made it pass, we were met with its companion, another enormous fish-like being, my companion calling it Hydra before a massive roar from the thing sent the vehicle reeling, freeing me from the thing and sending me into the ocean depths. How I survived the brutal pressure of the deep or avoided drowning immediately, I do not know. All I can remember is a bright light enveloping me, and when I was shaken awake by the king in yellow, he pointed to the glowing trinket in my shirt pocket. Never free from the grasp of these creatures, it seemed that the boy was waiting for this opportunity to approach me with the flirtatious behavior I had come to expect from these things, though a quick flash of wit allowed me to evade its advances unlike I failed to do so with the silver-haired girl. I was finally able to take in my location, as the green light that seemed to clear the ocean waters away from the corpse city seemed to beckon me with a sense of warmth. Again I was at Relia, a place I should not be, struggling to comprehend the cyclopean city before me. Dazed as I was by the floating spheres, cylinders, and other oddly angled objects in that green-encrusted dark masonry, non-Euclidean geometry in the architecture preying on my senses, the yellow boy directed my attention towards the cathedral that dominated the skyline. There, he said, were the presences of the other creatures, and we began making our way through that horrific city to join them, the maddening sense of the place already gnawing at my mind. End of chapter.